Hello, folks. Welcome back to World War II TV and the first of a double bill today. And we couldn't get two more extreme subjects. Later on, we're talking about the deadly urban warfare in Manila in 1945. And now we're talking about going on stage. But it's all part of the same war. So on Matt Eaton's first appearance, he spoke broadly about the entertainment of troops and particularly ENSA. Today, he returns to share the story of Virginia Vernon, one of the key players that helped bring hope and spirit to servicemen and women across the globe. His book, Madam V, is in the links below. I'll bring him in now. Good afternoon, Matt. How are you today?
Hey, Woody. I'm very well, thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, it just occurred to me that urban warfare in Manila and going on stage, two very, very different parts of World War II. But as we talked about in the first show, morale is that tricky thing that when you're analyzing a battle, it's that kind of, when in football they say, you've got to have the good spirit and he's lost the dressing room and things like that. And we analyze the attributes of people and attributes of divisions and squadrons and formations, and trying to pin down exactly how important the morale is really difficult. But you can, at least as you've been doing, look at how the process worked to get entertainment to the troops, and then the sort of the effectiveness behind it and the psychology, I guess, gets a bit more complicated. But we were just saying that this is kind of the path you're on now. You're doing your PhD on this. So is before we get into the presentation about the subject, how difficult is it analyzing and studying something like ENSA and the other entertainment services?
Yeah, I got into this topic because I love Jonathan Fennell's The People's War, all about morale. I firmly sort of believe all the things that he's been looking at, and I'm reading his latest book, Collapse, and in it there's a bit he talks about generals win battles but societies win wars, and the mobilization of society is a really important theme through a lot of history at the moment, and so the one thing that Jonathan didn't really go into in much detail in The People's War was entertainment. And that's, for me, that was kind of an obvious kind of thing that the British Army, RAF, Navy did in terms of morale for the troops. So so that's what inspired my my sort of research. And you mentioned ENSA. I mean, I'll talk a lot about ENSA today, the Entertainment National Services Association. There's not a lot of information out there, but I've gone quite a long way down this rabbit hole. And I'll talk a bit about the historiography and how I came to find out about Madam V, Virginia Vernon, as part of this this presentation.
Right. And I, in reading what you sent me, it's like she is to entertainment kind of what Dowding was to the air defense system in a way.
Yeah.
It's that kind of central figure that everything bounces off. You need that sort of ambassador behind something, otherwise things don't get off the ground, do they? So well, over to you, Matt. And folks, if you have questions, we've already had a couple of questions about how ENSA runs. We'll see where we have time for those kind of things. But I'll hand over to Matt to take us through this. And Madam V.
Thank you. Well, this was a particularly deep rabbit hole that I explored and ended up writing a book. So which is fantastic. But really, I started my research as part of a PhD looking at entertainment and its impact on troop morale during the Second World War. Some of the themes I'm going to talk about today are the mobilization of all areas of society as part of a total war, including something as far away from battles as entertainment. The second thing is about the personal records as a resource for historians. And I know James Holland's been doing this for years, Phil Craig, and Jonathan Fennell's newest book, Collapse, leans heavily on personal diaries and things like that. But particularly with Virginia Vernon, I think it's interesting because it shows how personal friendships and those informal networks that existed. Nobody's ever written these things down, but you can see the influence of decision making using these these things, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. And then the other aspect, because I am studying military history, not just a culture and society history. It's how far the British Army reflected society. And so there were entertainment officers like Jack Hawkins, who you may see in a few movies, things like that. So again, these are some of the themes that I'll talk about as part of this presentation today. All right, so I'm going to talk a bit about ENSA, and I I think it's a remarkable organization. It was quite unlike anything that existed before. So in the First World War, there was plenty of entertainment, but this was sort of thrown together by volunteer civilian organizations and with the troops. They were organizing that themselves. It was a very, you know, largely static. I'm sort of conscious of the sort of Eastern Front and some of the other aspects of the First World War, but on the Western Front it was largely static, and so theatres were built really close to the front line, and so it became a real part of everyone's life in the trenches. In the Second World War, Basil Dean, the guy on the right there, he had been instrumental in setting up garrison theatres in the First World War. He also was a very successful theatre producer and was one of the founders of Ealing Studios. Sort of back in the in the sort of 20s and 30s, he was making films, so he was very influential in entertainment. And in the run up to the Second World War, he started lobbying the government, saying that, well, you need to mobilize the entertainment industry. This is really important to morale. I can see from the First World War how this influenced the troops. And so, he started to push for the government to fund entertainment. Now, the idea of government-funded arts or culture was absolutely alien to Britain in 1939. There are papers I found for people comparing it with communism or fascism. It's like, this isn't the kind of thing we do. We just let people get on with it, and it's all sort of best efforts and so forth. But there was a sort of a recognition among some politicians that actually entertainment would be quite useful. So Basil Dean persuaded the NAFI, the service arm of the armed forces, that they should create an entertainment division within them, and that's where the Entertainment National Services Association was born. So that's really important, right? Because what you had, the NAFI, for all their canteens and the shops and things like that, that was all paid for by soldiers, airmen, seamen, and they take the revenue from the army or the services, and they then plow that into profits. They have to operate at a profit, so they were being paid for by the armed services. So that's how it started. So for a start, that was an important step. So that's why ENSA was quite different in the Second World War, because the army was paying for this entertainment service. ENSA was based in Drury Lane at the Theatre Royal, and attracted an awful lot of artists, stage hands, electricians, scenery painters, etc. And it covered a whole range of different performances. So radio. They made some films. They also did the music hall acts, which were very popular at the time, variety acts. But they did ballet, they did some opera, classical music. So it was a huge sort of variety, and rightly so, because the British Army was growing at such a rate, it had to cater for all tastes. So as the war progressed, the NAFI realised that demand for entertainment was going to outstrip the money they were getting from the canteens and entrances to go and to shows to see it. And so the Treasury stepped in 1941. And so ENSA became a quasi-state run, as it was backed by public money for a while, although that was all paid back in the end. But that's again a really significant point about ENSA. And thank goodness the Treasury did step in, because they are very good at keeping records, and I've lent heavily on the Treasury records, although they're very dry. They were noting down exactly what was spent, where, what shows were going out, what was spent on scenery in Calcutta on this certain date, and so stuff like that. ENSA records do not exist. There's very little in terms of ENSA records left, unfortunately, for various reasons. So that's just a bit of a sort of background to ENSA. I should also say, although Basil Dean is wearing a uniform and he looks a bit like somebody from Dad's Army, ENSA was a civilian organisation. It had a bit of a complex relationship with the armed forces. It provided entertainment to the British Army, the RAF, the Navy, but also all Commonwealth troops. And it operated through the NAFI. Now, when the NAFI sent civilians abroad, they operated as the Expeditionary Forces Institute under the Royal Army Services Corps. So the RASC, FE for men, or the Auxiliary Territorial Services, or ATS for women. The uniform that they wore, as in this picture, was introduced in 1943, and it was as much to, well, there are several reasons. Firstly, they were operating in a war zone, and so they were frightened that if they were captured, they'd be shot as spies if they were just civilians. But actually, more practically, it allowed them to get on transport. They were basically given the sort of the same privileges as a lieutenant, and so it allowed for them to operate in those kind of areas.
Bit like Group Captain Stagg, the meteorologist, who wasn't actually in the RAF. He was, because he was given an emergency commission, but it was so he could move through the military environments without it causing problems of all civilians going in there, because obviously ENSA has to move through the military. So yeah, they need to be sort of recognized as being affiliated, if not part of.
Exactly that. Yeah. And it's really important for opening doors and things like that, and we'll go into that in a bit. So Virginia Vernon. So as I've sort of described, the historiography was a bit thin on the ground. There's a lot written about ENSA from people that performed for ENSA. Stars like Charlie Chester, although they didn't work in ENSA, they worked in they were in the army, but they talked about ENSA and entertainment. There's a lot of anecdotes in there. There's no cross-referencing of sources, and it's really more for after-dinner speeches or comedy routines than anything else. The key, has been the Treasury papers, as I mentioned, because they were paying ENSA bills from 1941. The NAFI, Army welfare papers. So the Army Welfare Service under Ronald Adam, developed hugely towards the end of the war, and became quite sophisticated around entertainment, especially. So that's been a really good resource. There's cabinet papers. Churchill talks about, at one stage, Churchill talks about getting rid of Basildine and replacing him with Noel Coward in 1944, and people are going, not sure, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm not sure that's a good idea. But yeah, it's the odd nod, and the fact that these people were talking about entertainment shows that it was quite important.
Yeah.
The other sources are Basildine's own papers, which are really carefully curated and in the Rylands Institute in Manchester. But it's more what isn't there than what's there. But then at the Imperial War Museum, Virginia Vernon's papers are there, and so Virginia Vernon was the chief welfare officer for ENSA. Um, she um, she stayed with ENSA from near the beginning. It was sort of November 1939 when she was posted to Arras, through to almost when it was wound up in August 1946. So that is about 12 boxes of papers. It includes private diaries, letters, some official reports from ENSA that she shared, but things like she kept a memoir as well, a diary that is very, very important to look at. So it's been huge in illuminating some of the relations between ENSA and the military, because she was there as the liaison officer in Naples, talking to the RAF group captain there to get entertainment onto the the RAF base and things like that. So it's invaluable. Virginia was slightly older than most of the people that were in ENSA. She was sort of late 40s, early 50s at the start of the war. She'd already had a successful career as on Broadway. She was a singer in the sort of early part of the 20th century, and she'd made a living during the 30s, translating Noel Coward's plays and R.C. Sheriff's the plays into French, from English to French. So Journey's End. And she lived in Paris. She lived in a rather nice apartment in the Quai de Bethune, just on the near Notre Dame. And she was married to somebody called Frank Vernon. They didn't have any children. It was just the two of them. But they were intimately kind of connected with the West End and entertainment, and they knew Basildine very well. So when Basildine, in the summer of 1939, he was looking at, okay, how am I going to get this ENSA show on the road? I need somebody in France who can speak French very well, liaise with the French hoteliers, talk to the cinema operators and the theatre operators in France, and I need somebody who is not going to take no for an answer. And so he asked Virginia to do this, and that's how she became involved with ENSA. So the journey for Virginia's war starts in early November 1939 with the British Expeditionary Force at the GHQ in Arras. She, they were attached to the British Army, but obviously worked a lot with the RAF as well. And they were working with the RAF gang show and Ralph Reeder's entertainment group for the RAF, but also sending cinema shows, um, concert parties to both the RAF and to the army. And it's an interesting start because she came at this completely cold. She knew nothing about the army, so it's an idiot's guide to the British Army. In the first couple of weeks, she was writing home to her husband, who had been a major in the First World War, saying, "What does this pip mean? What does that stripe mean?" And he sent back sort of long letters describing the etiquette of conducting meetings with various people. If there's a colonel in the room, who to speak to first. If there's also a major and things like that. Also, he really interestingly, having served in the army, he gave her a whole list of do's and don'ts when taking orders and giving orders. So because some of the things she found was that the officers were thinking, oh, this bossy civilian, I don't have to do what she tells me. She came unstuck a couple of times in the first few weeks, and her husband sort of suggested writing everything down, handing that written orders to people, writing down exactly what you've done at the end of each day, stuff like that, which is just kind of so valuable for operating in this kind of arena, but something that nobody could really tell you unless you'd lived it. So she faced a lot of chauvinism, as you might expect. She had to get things done, and she was relentless. She would not take no for an answer. She worked very closely with all the hoteliers, but actually it was operating in the British Army that was much more difficult. But she managed it. She influenced a lot of the high up officers to get stuff done as well. So that helped. There are some lovely characters in there that she met. Major Haygarth, who for me is a real Captain Mannering of Dad's army, who was in the RASC, who used to call her little lady, and things like that. So it's got some lovely stories about that, and how she sort of got him to do things. And then also you've got the entertainers like Noel Coward, Leslie Henson, Gracie Fields, George Formby, who come over, and some of the anecdotes that come out from that as well. But yeah, there was some. I think what she learned in these first few months in a very, very cold north of France was, during that winter, was the power of entertainment to transform the spirits, to lift the spirits and morale of the troops. And that ignited a flame that kept going, it kept her going throughout the rest of the war.
Because I can imagine the problem, in 1940, is that she's dealing with majors and lieutenant colonels and what have you, who aren't, of course, against the idea of their troops being happier. They're not against this process. What they're maybe prioritizing is enough tanks, enough training, enough rifle, and entertainment is going to be somewhere down the list. So it's not not that they don't care, just that there is an order in which they want to do things, but she can only do what come from the direction she wants to, which is to provide entertainment. So I imagine that early period being a little bit not tense as such, but fraught possibly.
Well, no, absolutely. That dynamic gets worse when you get into Italy and North Africa, definitely. Um, I think at this time there was a lot of focus on entertainment because people were just bored.
Yeah,
In the early part of 1940. Um, yeah, but yeah, you're right. There's a slight sort of change, and the fact that she was a civilian and she was not wearing a military uniform at this time, which I think counted against her.
excellent. Thank you.
Um, right. So, of course, that didn't last very long. The 10th of May, we have, well, the Germans invaded, but the ENSA, in true Ealing comedy style, had prepared um, a code word for the ending of the phony war, and that word was Hamlet. And at 9 a.m. on Friday, the 10th of May, 1940, that code word was sent from Drury Lane to GHQ, the Effie office. Of course, they were they probably had a clue that something was going on, given it was the GHQ of the BEF. But that swung into action an evacuation plan that had been organised a couple of months before, of getting all these civilians out of away from the border with Belgium. Uh, on that date, there were 207 civilian performers wandering around northern France, including Will Hay, who was, you'll recognise him from the 1940s and 50s films, um, who were bewildered by the German. German planes strafing some of the villages, and so again, largely because of Virginia's administrative prowess, she knew exactly where everyone was, how to get them back. They were very quickly assigned a bus. Their lorries of stage and props were collated together, and they had the other thing was the mobile cinema van. So they had 16mm double projectors that were operating in forward areas with the BAF as well. So they all needed to come back from to Arras initially, but then back south. Now, as you can see from the map, so rather than taking the most direct route to the channel ports, they wanted to they had a backup in Rouen, so they retreated to Rouen first, and over a period of about a month, I think they finally got out from Brest on the 17th of June, um, and or 16th of June, sorry, and so that was a really interesting period, and not so much is written about that, or sort of that path, but there were a lot of troops down there. Along the way, they were looking at trying to re-establish entertainment for the troops as they retreated, and then there was the okay, we're going to open a second front. We're going to stay here. We're not going to move anywhere. No, actually, we're going to move back. That's not going to work. So that's a really interesting period of her memoir that is fascinating. And during this period, Virginia wasn't, obviously she wasn't sort of organizing the entertainment, but she was looking after the FE officers and the sergeants and the other ranks for as they retreated. So she was going into Rouen and sort of saying, look, I've got 50 other ranks I need to put up, talking to the French hoteliers, getting food for them, just looking after them basically. And Yeah, she boards one of the last troop ships out of Brest, together with 4,000 British troops. She's lost everything apart from the clothes she stands in, and she lands in Plymouth, and it's really disheartening for her. She's depressed, she's exhausted, and to make matters worse, Major Haygarth basically says, right now, little lady, you're a civilian. You need to toddle off there and get your own transport. My men are coming back with us to the camp. So she's completely lost and on her own when she gets back to Plymouth. That doesn't last long. She's back in London, and Basildine has plans for her at Drury Lane, where she's given an office. She's appointed welfare officer, not for the whole of the UK, where she sets up a network of hostels and hotels as entertainers. Not only go to army camps, garrison towns, naval ports and RAF bases, but also factories, shipyard workers, mining towns as well. So she's crisscrossing the whole of the UK at this time.
And this is a time where morale needs picking up. Yeah, yes, Churchill's done his "we shall fight them on the beaches," and the country has sort of been rallied by that. But everyone knows that's in some ways sort of a paper-thin facade. Is that the war is not going well for the Allies at this point? So people need to be cheered up, even if they think they're going to go down, kind of go down with a smile on their face.
Well, you're right, and actually, it's an interesting time because ENSA was almost snuffed out during September to December 1940. There was a strong push around, especially from the British Army, to say we ought to take entertainment under our own management because we can't rely on these civilians to help us do this. And there was some really, it was a close thing. I think the only thing that stopped that happening was Bevan and ENSA extending its services to factory workers in the shipyards and mining as well. And it was like, okay, well, we might as well keep ENSA, and especially when the Treasury started funding it from 1941, that kind of made sure it stayed. But yeah, you'd think that actually ENSA would become more important, but there was a feeling that this is too important to give to a civilian organization without our proper control. So yeah. So along with setting up this network of hostels and welfare officers to look after the civilian entertainers as they went around Britain, Virginia, because of her language skills, became chairwoman of the Advisory International Council. So there were obviously thousands of different nationalities of Allied troops in the UK at this time, Czech airmen, French, Free French, and things like that. And so she was also responsible for matching up, the Polish opera company, concert parties from France and things like that with the right units and formations of Allied troops over in the UK. So it was a very international kind of time for entertainment as well. Oh, she spoke several different languages, and she picked up languages very quickly. So during this time, she spent quite a lot of time up in Scotland and Scapa Flow with the Navy, setting up the the welfare at the naval bases up there. Had some interesting experiences, and then also Belfast, with the shipyards out there, and the troops that were stationed around those areas. So she was out there as well. Drury Lane Theatre Royal didn't escape the Blitz, and on the 13th of October 1940, it had a direct hit. Her office was destroyed, but it was rebuilt very quickly. And there was a picture on the left here of the nose cone of the bomb that went through at Drury Lane. So that's she was in the UK between July and May 1940, July 1940 to May 1943. So obviously, with the turning of the tide in North Africa, Tunis grad, the entertainment became more important in Tunis, Algeria, and North Africa in general. So Monty was a great proponent of entertainment, and he'd promised the Eighth Army that there'll be no shortage of entertainment and welfare at the end of the fighting in Tunis. And so the British Army reached out to Basildine in early 1943 to say, okay, what can you do for us? Going through the War Office always made things much more complicated, and the red tape that you'd require to get like a flight out there, priority flight, transport from Gibraltar to Algiers, all those sort of things were an absolute nightmare. So basically, they used their personal influence a lot in order to get this work done. Basildine flew out to Gibraltar, having the approval of the Treasury, not the War Office. And he picked up a couple of crates of sherry in Gibraltar, took them over to Algiers, located General Alexander and Arthur Tedder, who he'd gone to school with, dropped off a couple of crates of sherry in the right places, and secured basically travel passes for himself and Virginia Vernon to go and do whatever they needed to do to get entertainment to the troops in Tunis and other places. So Virginia was involved. She was sent to Tunis to organize the concerts around the municipal theatre on the parade, the Liberation Parade day in 1943. So it was about a week after the city's liberation. So, she was there pretty early on. Lots of dignitaries went out there, and she organized the show for King George VI, and they shared a cigarette. Had some quite a touching kind of conversation around the king saying, I wish I could talk to the troops and the Tommies that the way that you do, and basically there was a bit of a recognition of her role. Later that year, she was awarded an MBE. She after the war, she was also awarded the Légion d'honneur. So she did get some recognition for her work during the war. And she also met Eisenhower. Now, the top brass like their entertainment themselves, and they had a group of West End stars that went out there, led by Leslie Henson, who was quite a big name at the time, and they were supposed to be playing at the the Garrison Theatre in Tunis, and it was coming close to curtain up, and Virginia realized that they hadn't returned, so got in a car, went to the Eisenhower's kind of villa as it overlooked the coast there, and basically manhandled the concert party out, and and telling him that you know, they're not for you, they're for the troops. And I think, you know, this shows somewhat of the passion that she had for you know, making sure that the Tommies were looked after, they were entertained, but also the fact that she didn't belong to this military hierarchy, and she could operate almost outside it.
Yeah.
Which, you know, obviously somebody with you know, like Jack Hawkins as an entertainment officer could never have gone into the commander-in-chief's villa and got those artists out of there. So anyway, it's quite an interesting sort of side story. Of course, after North Africa started to get ready for the invasion of Sicily and the mainland Europe, Virginia was very involved with this. The 51st Highland Division came in for some particular attention for entertainment. They sent out Will Fife, who was you know, an archetype Scottish comedian. He's famous for his "I Belong to Glasgow" song, which he gave a concert the night, well, whether it was the night before or soon before Operation Husky, but it's said that the 51st Highland Division stormed the beaches singing "I Belong to Glasgow" in honor of that concert party. Yeah, whatever. It's a nice story. George Formby, the ukulele man, shouldn't be forgotten. He did a lot for the troops, obviously, but not always. You know, he was not an easy person to manage, and Virginia's handwritten diaries show another side of Formby's sort of press and media machine, which was run by his wife Beryl. He was obsessed by the idea of you know, being the first artist to play on mainland Europe, and so he had been scheduled to perform to the 51st Highland Division of 5,000 odd troops near Catania in early September 1943, but he heard about the you know, the movement into Reggio, and that's the kind of the direction of travel, and so managed to persuade somebody to give him transport across the Straits of Messina, and arrived just after Operation Baytown to perform for a startled group of troops in Reggio. Meanwhile, the poor old 51st Highland Division were left in Sicily, you know, let down with no George Formby. Possibly a lucky escape, actually, if I were them, but they were still.
Well, Phil Blood is in your. He likes George Formby, so I'm not a fan, but it's interesting that she's dealing with figures like Eisenhower, but also dealing with stars with egos, because
yeah,
they're, you know, the whole Maurice Chevalier in France and Paris time. There are stars dealing with the war in different ways, shall we say, to kind of prosper their careers, because entertainers have been drafted, have gone into the services, so there's an uncertain future for them as well. So you know, there's working solely for the benefit of the public, and there's also working for the benefit of the public, but also making sure your career keeps going. So it's a complicated thing, I guess. She's dealing with.
It is. She was very much kind of motivated and championed the soldier's point of view. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, There was another incident with Gracie Fields letting down the Eighth Army around this time as well, and having to go back to fulfill a contractual obligation in New York. It's a fine line, and I suppose this is an interesting sort of theme that I'm exploring, which is that around this mobilization of society, you've got this kind of semi-professional, but also harnessing their talents for a greater good. And I'm not sure. I don't know how many other areas of the war had this sort of dilemma. But this is certainly, you've hit the nail on the head with that kind of thing.
And the other thing is that morale can go up and it can go down. If you start promising people shows and things, entertainment, and then it doesn't happen, or it gets cancelled, or the headline doesn't turn up, or it rains and the electrics goes out, or something, you're taking troops from a level of hoping to get happier to now actually pissed off. So it's if you don't promise anybody anything, they will stay at a level. But if you promise them things and then don't deliver, and as the war goes on, logistics, of course, is the big issue in Italy and Sicily, is getting stuff to places, I can understand it would be somewhat tense.
Yes, exactly. Vehicles, little things like vehicles, accommodation, very thin on the ground in Foggia in sort of October 1943 and November. And so some interesting exchanges there. Right. So she carried on sort of doing her war work, and she was really ENSA's chief problem solver by this stage. There was a ship that had been torpedoed containing about 100 ENSA entertainers in the Mediterranean. They had lost everything, and there were some legal. It's crazy thinking about it. These nobody was hurt, thankfully, but these 100 civilians had lost everything, and there were quibbles about who would pay for the insurance, for an accordion, for
we're back to the accountants again, aren't we, Matt?
It all comes down to money and the legal side of things. And anyway, she was sent out to Cairo to sort that out, and she sort of bashed some heads together and said, come on, what's going on? And again, bypassing the chain of command and going straight to the a colonel, rather than sort of dealing with the sort of the lower sort of officers, where everything kind of ground to a halt because they didn't want to make the wrong decision. So anyway, she got that sorted out. She went to the Middle East, and then out to India briefly before being recalled to the UK in time for D-Day. So she landed back in Britain, sort of, I think the 1st or 2nd of June. So it was one of the sort of last flights probably into Britain, because before all the airspace was closed up. ENSA, with the help of the Army Welfare Service, did a sterling job in Normandy. They really organized themselves into mobile columns. They landed there on the 24th of July, so a while after D-Day, but it was safe for them to do that by then. They set up in a field just north of Bayeux, and there's some lovely photos of the ENSA artists in that field.
I feel that's a field in the little village of Somerville, which is just north of Bayeux. It's the same area where the Polish Armour Division gathered in the same month, or a few weeks earlier. There was a large field that was sort of a transit campy kind of place. I feel I know it. I drive past it. Although the orchard is still there, I think.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah. No, and it was a lovely summer apparently in 1944, and long sort of hot days. What by July and
Yeah,
August, they built a trench in the middle of that field, and they jumped in it whenever they saw an enemy aircraft. I mean, look, you can't make this stuff up. In terms, I just go to Ealing comedies when I think about this, but it had a serious side as well. I mean, they were, as a transit hub, it people, the men seeing familiar entertainers, cinema shows, etc., must have been a huge morale boost. Either coming back from con or going out, and so really important work that they were doing during this time. Then as the war progressed, autumn 1944, attention turned in terms of welfare of troops in India and Burma. There were a couple of sort of headlines in the national newspapers, which always triggers, um, you know, official reports. And there was a Munster report. Lord Munster went over to India and Burma and came back and said that the welfare of the British troops out there is awful. It needs to be improved. And so ENSA's attention um, sort of really focused on India and Burma. And one of the sort of themes that I'm looking at is kind of, how do you, there's only a finite number of entertainers that are willing to go out abroad. You can't order somebody to go abroad if you're a
yeah,
civilian. It was all down to volunteers, and it's balancing Italy, Normandy, Middle East and Persia, and India and Burma, and this became the real focus. So she spent a long period of time in India, first Delhi, then Bombay, and Calcutta, where ENSA had their headquarters. And Jack Hawkins was based out in Calcutta, sending entertainers all over the subcontinent. And there's a lovely sort of photo where she sent a report back from Calcutta, and just to explain the logistical nightmare of sending sort of entertainers all around India, and she superimposed Europe on top of India just to show the size of the place. This wasn't sort of just managing it from Bari
mm,
to Naples. She met Lady Louis Mountbatten. They had a quite a close friendship. Lady Louis Mountbatten helped a lot to sort of grease the wheels in terms of getting things done. And she made a trip down um, into Burma to visit Bill Slim, who was really angry about the amount of ENSA performances offered to him, and basically he said, "You're the person to sort it out." And I think it's really important. Like, Vera Lynn went to India and Burma. Everyone talks about Vera Lynn, and she went there for a couple of months in 1944. There were people from that people probably don't recognize today, who spent years out there entertaining the troops. There was a guy from Sheffield called Stainless Stephen, um, who he must have spent 24 months going around all over India. So it's those unsung heroes that are mentioned in this book that I think are really important to remember. Um, so she ends up in Rangoon on VJ Day, hearing about the end of the war. But of course, entertainment actually grew in importance after the fighting stopped. Troops needed something to occupy them. And so Virginia carried on her organization into Southeast Asia, and she ended up in Hong Kong in November 1945, setting up welfare for the troops, but also for the entertainers who would be sent out there. ENSA arrived in Singapore on the 5th of September, I think, which is I think it was the same day that the 5th Indian Division liberated it as well. So, they were really not only up there with the movement of the troops, but they were encouraged by the army to be there, especially after the war. She was really tired and homesick by November 1945, and she just wanted to go back to Paris and go back to her flat that she knew was still there, but unfortunately Dean needed her for a few other things. As I mentioned, ENSA was being wound up. It was replaced by the Combined Services Entertainment Organization, and that required some administration. So she didn't reach back to Paris until kind of April 1946, where she resigned from ENSA, and she was she was kind of broken at that stage. She had an enormous dynamo which lasted 7 years, but by this stage she was done. And so the book, the biography ends there, but she was a remarkable woman. She started writing for the Mirror, the Daily Mirror, and carried on doing some great things with the Mirror after the war. She set up their East Africa office. She visited Canada. She was involved with trying to sell the Jane cartoon strip to different countries. And anyway, she was very much involved after the war in sort of the Daily Mirror as a writer as well. She was described by a service newspaper in the summer of 1945 as the war's most travelled woman, and I'm not sure anyone who's to dispute that. She travelled a lot, and she sacrificed.
Yeah, got to be up there, certainly. Yeah.
So that's it. That's it. I just want to say, I feel very fortunate to have been able to kind of go down this rabbit hole. I've co-written this book with her godson, Adam Fairclough, who just found a blog post that I'd written after I went to the Imperial War Museum and looked through her papers. He reached out to me. He lives in Washington, DC, and it's sort of 2 years later we ended up writing a book. So anyway, that's me.
Brilliant. Well, we have some questions. Some from very early on, so some you'll be able to answer quickly, some a bit more in depth. Ian Carr said, were the stages and sound, etc., responsibility of the force being entertained or ENSA? So if you went to an RAF base, did they put up the stage and the lights, or did ENSA do it?
Yeah. A bit of both. They created some portable stages that ENSA created portable stages at Drury Lane, but then in the more established static theatres, there were garrison theatres and things like that. So the Army and the Navy RAF did it.
Okay, thank you. Darren Little asked two questions. Did she or ENSA get to the commando training grounds in Scotland? You mentioned she was there earlier in the war. And he also said that, because you were talking about lack of archives, in the, where is it? The #1 Commando War Diaries, there are references to attending ENSA shows. So if I'll put you in touch with Darren if you want, and Darren can share what he's got there. But
I don't know Darren. We've got
okay, well, there you are. Do you happen to know if she went to Scotland or went to the commando site?
She did. Well, yeah. I mean, this is the other thing. I mean, if she did, she wouldn't have written about it, because she would have called. She went to a really interesting site though in Scotland. She went to one of these dark factories where everything was blacked out in the middle of the Highlands. She went through some thick sort of velvet curtains in the middle of the night, and it was a busy factory full of light with an ENSA variety show going on at the front of the factory. So yeah, there's some interesting stuff there.
Brilliant. This could be a rabbit hole, but I'll let you try and sum it up succinctly. Lemonator says, do we know what shows were the most popular with the troops? I mean, variety, I'm guessing.
No, right. Yeah, it's a really good question, and I'm trying to answer it. Trouble is, it's so subjective. What I like, somebody else doesn't like. I mean, I've already. But towards the end of the war,
we've lost your camera for a second there. I don't know why.
Sorry.
We can still hear you, but
okay, good. Towards the end of the war, it changed slightly. Sorry, go. It changed. People. So at the beginning of the war, variety, escapism, musicals. From 1944 onwards, it's much more serious. People loved opera more. They wanted sort of more serious dramas, things like that. So yeah, it changed. It's a real watershed moment for entertainment.
Okay, thank you. Interesting one from Smolder. How did the ENSA team react to the "every night something awful" tag? I mean, for a start, was that even something that was said in the war, or is that a post-war addition? I mean,
no.
Did they claim it? Did they laugh at it?
Yeah, no. Apparently, it was Tommy Trinder, who was performing for ENSA, who came up with that. So you're your own worst enemy. And then soon after, when the combined services entertainment came about in 1946, he went on stage and said, "Oh yeah, CSE, it stands for Chaos Supersedes ENSA." So it's a bit of a British
self-deprecating.
We love to laugh at British Rail, etc. Yeah.
Fred says Bob Hope will be broadcast on the radio. Did ENSA shows ever end up on the BBC at any point?
Yep. There was a regular ENSA half hour from very early in the war. It was a regular feature.
Brilliant. Oh, we're playing through these very quickly. Last one, I think, from Gary. Interesting one is, were Virginia and the fellow entertainers paid for their morale duties by the UK government, and were they looked after following the war? Because, were the entertainers like self-employed? I mean, I guess we're back to the accounts again, aren't we?
Yeah, no, it's follow the money. And it's so there was it was a low wage. They were paid. It was I think it was £10 a week to begin with. I think it went up a bit, but as you said, Woody, at the beginning of the war, people were worried that they wouldn't have any job at all, so it was a lifeline. There was no pension provided. They were not included in the Victory March in 1946. They only started to be invited to the Remembrance Day parade in the year 2000. So it
reminds me of that. There was one, I think several times Eisenhower was asked what were the winning things of World War II, and people only ever reprint the first bit of his sentence, because he said things like the landing craft, the jerry can, but actually the first time he was asked it, he did a whole list of things, and I believe he said somewhere down the bottom things like email and things like that. So he did, as he got down the list, he did mention things. I don't know that he mentioned entertainment specifically, but the point is, he acknowledged that winning the war is not just down to having ultra or good radar or whatever. It's a whole smorgasbord of things. As I'm like you, I'm a big fan of Jonathan Fennell and what he's done analyzing, because you can see the correlation between the times when the morale is low and the war effort. You can see that the winter of 44, when desertions are at their peak, when trench foot is at its peak, those kind of things. And so it's an important work to kind of connect the dots on this and try to understand. We had another question which I inadvertently here it is, from Adam. This is the final one. I like the wording of this. Was attendance to entertainment voluntary, or was there an element of the mandatory fun we find in modern workplaces? Because
Yeah,
you see those photos and everybody at the front of in front of the stage with violins and they're all cheering, but there's always one fellow at the back who's sitting there, arms crossed, going, "What the fuck is all this?" Because as you said, that guy might be there for the opera turn that's coming up later, not for Tommy Trinder. So, was it compulsory?
Yeah, it varied. So I just recommend. I wanted to show a clip, but it's not on YouTube anymore. I think it might be on Amazon Prime, but there are other sort of places for free. But it's called. It was a film made in 1959 called The Desert Mice.
Yep, it came up in the sidebar earlier. It was on Talking Pictures a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, perfect. Watch it, because there's a clip in there where Sid James is doing a routine and it's awful, and there's a cut to troops, other ranks will attend on, by order of blah blah blah. I think it really depends. I mean, if you think about it, 7 years across lots of different circumstances, I think 4,000 entertainers ended up, performers working for ENSA. So there were some good, there were some pretty poor ones as well. And you also had an increasing volume of service entertainment as well. So so that was there as well. So, but
we did the show about Sam Kidd with his son Jonathan, and Sam was ending up putting on shows in the POW camp he was in, and was getting assistance from the UK. They were sending him scripts and plays and like that, and you end up, it was where in the camp he was, I forget who Peter Butterworth was in a prisoner of war camp. So it was an avenue into showbiz for servicemen. When Peter Sellers started doing the voices of things and so it wasn't just the entertainers entertaining the servicemen. It was the servicemen becoming, and women becoming, entertainers themselves, and then carrying on. So, well, Matt, brilliant stuff. And there's no one else who I can turn to for this kind of content.
Exactly.
There's midway historians coming out of my arse. I don't mean that, but an Arnhem. But entertainment is a field that you're ploughing on your own. So I'm really glad we had this discussion. So, folks, the links to the description were there. I'll flash up the you can get the Q code there, get into it there. So, Madam V. A little bit of an aspect of the war that we don't think about, so I urge you all to go and get it. So brilliant stuff. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you,
folks. I'm back in a few hours' time, meeting up with Nick to talk about Manila and the urban fighting in there, horrific fighting, but also particularly what the American Army learnt and Marines in that campaign. Looking forward to that. As always, click like and subscribe. I will see you all again later on today. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, viewers.
Cheers.
Bye.